Are you thinking about buying a leasehold property? Perhaps it's a flat. Maybe you're not too sure of things like ground rent or service charge or how many years are left on the lease. In this video, I detail everything you need to know about leasehold properties. Now, I own both leasehold and freehold properties, and I think I'm well versed in the risks associated with owning a leasehold property. So watch this video all the way through to the very end, and we'll know whether or not you should buy that leasehold property. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Marco. I'm a portfolio landlord, property investor, property developer, and mentor. And I love investing in property and helping those new to property, or maybe those with a couple of properties, scale to that next level. Now, before we get into this video, I must apologize to you. Last night was a very difficult night. We've got two young boys, and our oldest was up for quite a lot of the night. So I apologize if I don't come across too well today, but please do bear with me, and hopefully you can get value from this video. So number one, what is a leasehold property? It's a really good question, right? A leasehold property means you don't own the building, nor do you own the land. You're essentially leasing this from the freeholder. Now, the freeholder owns both the land and the building. So with leasehold properties, you own them for the length of that lease. And after that, possession then reverts to the freeholder. So that's what a leasehold property is. Now let's move on to number two, ground rent, which is really important. So what is ground rent? Well, ground rent is where you pay normally an annual or a biannual fee to the freeholder, essentially for the rents of the land with which the building sits on, right? So this could be every 6 months, it could be every 12 months. Now, there's something really important, really crucial that you need to look out for when it comes to ground rent. Read the lease very carefully. If you're considering buying a property where the ground rent doubles every 5 or 10 years, this is a big red flag, because as you can see, this ground rent can quickly escalate over the years to come. Now, are you getting value from this video? If so, please do consider clicking that like button. It will really help push this video out to other people and grow the channel. Okay, so let's come on to service charge now. What is service charge? Well, service charge is in addition to ground rent, and this is paid by the leaseholder, normally to the block agent, whoever manages that whole block. And this covers things like the maintenance, the management, insurance, and those type of things. So let me give you a couple of really key things to look out for in the service charge. So first of all, who is the company that is managing these blocks of flats, right? It's really important to do research on the company, because there are lots of management companies out there that are really bad at what they do. Not only do they not get stuff done, but they're very expensive and they're not good value for you as a leaseholder. So make sure when you're buying a leasehold property that you have confidence, and maybe the block agent has a really good reputation and the other leaseholders are happy with them. And unlike freehold properties where you as the landlord and as the owner are responsible for insuring the property, when it comes to leasehold properties over here, again, normally the managing agent will do this for the whole block. So you won't normally have to arrange insurance individually. And when we come on to maintenance and repairs and things like that, obviously when you walk through the communal areas, maybe when you walk through the car park, what is the condition? Is this work actually getting done? Is the managing agent doing what they're supposed to do? These are really important questions you need to be asking yourself. Now, here's one huge thing to look out for, and again, one huge red flag when it comes to leasehold properties, and this is a high service charge. Well, what do you mean, Marco? Now, if the service charge of this leasehold property is more than 1% of the property value, then most lenders don't like to lend on it. They see this as too high risk. So if you found a really nice leasehold property that you think's great and could be a really good investment, but if that service charge is more than 1% of the value of that flat or leasehold property, you will struggle to get a mortgage on it. Yes, there are some lenders you could approach, but most lenders don't want to know. So make sure your service charge is realistic. Ideally, make sure it's below 1%, and you should be okay when it comes to obtaining a mortgage. So let's come on to number three, really important variable to think about, which is how many years are left on the lease. And this is really key and really crucial. So for those of you that are familiar with auctions, you may have noticed that now and again you'll see, a leasehold flat in the auction going for really cheap. And you think, gosh, why is it going for really cheap? The pictures look great, doesn't need any work doing to it. Maybe it's rented out at a higher rent. Why is it going for so cheap? Normally, the answer is it's because it's got very little years left remaining on the lease. And again, mortgage lenders do not like this. Don't quote me on this. If you've got around 80 years or less, it's very difficult to get a normal mortgage on a leasehold property. If it's more than 80 years, you stand a good chance. Again, speak to your mortgage broker. If you want to be put in touch with my mortgage broker, Paul, who we've had on the channel before, then head to my website, ms7.uk, click on Use Our Suppliers and scroll down, tick the box that says mortgage broker, and I will put you in touch with Paul personally. He's absolutely great, and if anyone can get you buy-to-let mortgage or a mortgage on your residential property, it is Paul. now. Now here's the thing, what can we do about this? Marco, you said that, maybe if we're buying leasehold properties, we want more than 80 years-ish left on the lease so we can mortgage the property. Now here's the thing, you can extend that lease, right? Now, currently, as we are in 2023, when I'm recording this video, the leasehold reforms have not yet been passed. Now, we've been promised these for a number of years now from the government, and these reforms basically allow a lease to be extended far easier, but most importantly, for far less money than it does cost now to extend a lease, right? So we're still waiting for this reform to happen. And when this reform happens, it's such great news for leaseholders because they're able to genuinely extend their lease for a fraction of the cost it costs now. So you could take a gamble. You could buy a property that maybe you think, right, well, yes, there are very little years remaining on this lease, but you know what? I'm hoping that in the next 2 years, this leaseholder reform comes into play. And you know what? That means that it won't cost me as much as what I think it was going to cost to extend this lease. And overall, it could be a huge win. And here's the thing, if you're going to extend the lease and all of a sudden that property is now mortgageable, guess what? The value of that property will skyrocket. And I know many investors where their pure strategy is to find leaseholds with very low number of years left on the lease. They buy them, they either extend them now and try and negotiate with the freeholder, or they'll sit on it, they'll bank it, and they'll know maybe in 2 or 3 years when these reforms come in, it's going to be very kind to them. Now, a really important note to think about before I can tell you what you can do as an investor, and let's keep on the lease here, is the terms and conditions of your lease. This is really important. Make sure you read through this lease before you commit to purchasing this property. Again, this is why we use a good solicitor and a good conveyancer, because they can identify all the risks of owning this asset, right? That's what using a good solicitor is all about. So for example, if you want to buy this flat, this leasehold property, to get into the serviced accommodation business, to rent this flat out on a nightly rate on Airbnb or something like that, well, make sure you read that lease very, very carefully, because some leases say, right, we can't permit the use of this property for serviced accommodation or something to that effect. So it's important that you read the lease. Again, other things that you may find in the conditions of your lease is that subletting is not allowed, maybe pets are not allowed, and things of that nature. So make sure you read the lease and you're comfortable with the conditions. So the most important part of this video, action. What can we do now, Marco? Right, I found the leasehold property. You've spoken about the risks, you've spoken about ground rent, service charge, years on the lease, conditions, things of that nature. Should I buy this property, Marco? Well, here's the thing. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and hopefully by the end of this section, you'll have the answers to these questions and you'll know yourself whether or not to stick and buy this property and maybe move on to something different. So the first question we've got to ask ourselves is, where does the risk lie? What are the problems? Are these problems solvable? So for example, if the service charge is more than 1%, do we think that in the future it will be below 1%? Maybe it's only above 1% because actually they're having quite a bad year and there's a lot that we need to fix in the building, and this is just an anomaly. Again, we can use another example. A problem could be that in fact there are only 60 years left on this lease and no one's going to lend on 60 years, only expensive bridging finances. So, are we reasonably confident we can solve this issue and extend the lease? Only you can answer that question. Number 2, really important thing to ask yourself is, if you buy this property as is, maybe it's got issues, maybe it doesn't, do you think when it comes to selling this property in the future, it is a saleable asset? It's an attractive property where both maybe investors and homeowners will want to buy this leasehold flat. Again, if the answer is yes, that's great. It maybe suggests that it's a good property. But if the answer is no, and these issues aren't solvable, maybe I'd move on to something else. Now, here's the thing. You may say, Marco, well, that's irrelevant because I never want to sell this asset. I don't want to sell the flat. I want to keep it and let it out forever. Well, that's great, but there will be a point in time where maybe you're thinking of disposing of the asset, or maybe when you pass it down to your children, again, they may dispose of it. And you don't want to leave them with a property that's not very attractive and isn't going to be sold, quickly and for a good price on the open market. So for me, when I'm buying anything, even though I don't like selling property, I buy it with that in mind. If I had to sell it, is it an attractive investment? Would it be a quick and easy sale? And if the answer is no, more or less, I move on. Now here's the thing, the answer could be no now, and if I knew I could solve and fix these issues in the future, that would be fine. But if I couldn't, if there was something fundamentally wrong about the property, maybe the location or something like that, then I wouldn't buy it and I'd move on to the next opportunity. So if the answer to these questions that I've asked you already is no, and you're thinking, gosh, Marco, I don't want to buy this leasehold property, don't worry, I've got an alternative for you. If you compare leasehold properties and freehold properties properties. Leaseholds are harder. There are more risks, in my opinion, in leasehold properties. There's more to understand. I much prefer sticking to freehold property. Don't get me wrong, I've got leasehold property as well, but freehold property is generally easier and less headache and far simpler to understand, right? So consider finding a freehold property that meets your requirement. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised what freehold properties there are on the open market alone. So there you have it. Hopefully you can answer the question whether or not you should purchase that leasehold property, or maybe you should purchase a different leasehold property, or maybe go into buying a freehold property. The world is your oyster. Now, do you have a question? Maybe it's a particular question on the leasehold property. Please do comment below. And as you know, I personally respond to all questions submitted on the channel. Right, I'm trying something new here. YouTube knows you better than I know you. So I'm going to let YouTube suggest a video for you to watch. You'll see it appearing somewhere here. Watch the video. I'd absolutely love to see you on a future video. And I wish you all the very best in your property investing week. Goodbye.